right. Well, good morning. Welcome to our morning devotions. I'm not exactly sure what happened yesterday. I know that we were having trouble with our electricity. I mean, I also know that I'm out in the boondocks here on top of a mountain in south western Virginia, and I have Starlink, Elon Musk Starlink for my internet connection, and it runs wonderfully, amazingly. I mean, I would recommend it to anybody. But as with any satellites, with the sleet and the snow, I mean, the signal might have been interrupted some way, or I might have just lost enough juice to lose the sound. But the way the folks made it sound, it's like it just kind of slowly diminished. So the way Facebook Live is set up, unlike YouTube, because I never have this problem on YouTube, but on Facebook Live, I can't. There's no meter here, or there's no way to monitor whether or not my sound is working. All right, I can't see the bars come up and down depending on the volume. So I'm just assuming that everything is working. I can see myself in the camera, but I can't tell whether or not there's any sound until I play it at the end. So anyway, we'll give it another run. But good to see everybody this morning. It's a whole nother day. The sun's out. It's going to be in the 50s. The snow is melting. It's just a big change from yesterday and the day before. I guess up at my daughter's, up at my son's place, they had like 13 inches or something of snow, like in northern Virginia. That's paralyzing. Okay. All right. Well, here we are. We're back into 2 Samuel chapter 3. And as I said yesterday when I got this thing going, this chapter is full of material. All right. It's multifaceted and it's all very interesting. So, chapter 3, verse 1 begins with David, or the record of David's accomplishments, and that the house of David was growing stronger over the house of Saul, which is what we expect. The next section here in verses 2 through 5 talks about David's wives and the children born from David's wives. And this is the issue of polygamy, which everyone always wants to ask about. Polygamy was never God's design. It was one man and one woman, a man and a woman. There's only two genders, obviously. And it's not obvious for everyone, but I would say if it's not obvious, then there might be another problem, a medical problem, a psychological problem, because it's clear there's only men and women, and same in natural order. There's male and female. So here he has multiple wives, and this is something God allowed. And of course, Solomon is just going to take this to the limit through marrying many women, some for himself and some because of treaties made with their dads. But he has all these wives and concubines, and they lead him astray, and it's his great downfall for Solomon. So then the next thing you have here is there's a war between Saul and David, and this is constant. And Abner is the king, or not the king, he's the general, but Ishbosheth is the king that Abner has installed. And one thing I talk about Abner because Abner he is a mixed bag, and he is just a wily character. And I entitled this message, or this devotion, Abner the manipulative fool, because he is manipulating everything. What he does is he's trying to gain ascendancy in the realm in which he's operating. He's playing all the different angles here in the reign of Ishbosheth and in the reign of David, and he's trying to find himself the place where he can be to get furthest up the rung. That is exactly what he's doing. And he's calculating, and David is going to speak of him in high terms here at the end. But what he does here, and this is what we're going to see. Abner, it tells us in verse 7, and Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah. Now, a concubine would have been a wife, but without any legal standing. That is, her sons would not be heirs. So there was another layer of being betrothed, so to speak, or being married here back in the times of the kings, and they were the concubines. And so what Abner does after Saul is dead is he takes Rizpah, his concubine, or his widow, without legal standing, but nevertheless intimate with Saul, and sleeps with her. And this is the whole idea of identification. Because I mentioned yesterday, I don't know if it got out there, but remember Solomon's older brother wants to sleep with a Shulamite who has been a comfort to David in his old age. She's only sleeping with him to keep him warm. There's no intimacy. It's all very pure here. But she's there to care for the king like a nurse. It's before electric blankets. They're trying to keep the king warm, so they have a Shulamite that just sleeps with him, lays with him, only to keep him warm, body heat to keep him warm. But Solomon's older brother says to Bathsheba, Solomon's mom and the queen, to give me the Shulamite. Well, and Solomon says, and Bathsheba comes and asks Solomon, your brother's asking for the Shulamite to marry. And Solomon says, well, why doesn't he ask just for the whole kingdom? Because if he identifies with this woman who was so closely identified with the king, King David, then that would be an indication that he's the next in line. And this same idea is here, that Abner wants to sleep with the widow of the king, because it would appear then that he is, so to speak, without being in the line of the king, being exalted in the political structure of Israel over Ishbosheth, who is Saul's actual son. And so he said, and Ishbosheth says to Abner after he sleeps with Saul's widow, the concubine Rizpah, he says, wherefore hast thou gone into my father's concubine? And the idea here, let's see, are we still good? I don't know. Let's see. The whole idea here is that the king is now saying, why are you doing this? And this is what happens. It says in verse 8, then was Abner very wroth with the words of Ishbosheth, and I'm not going to read it, but it closes out here in verse 11, that after the king said something about what Abner was doing, it says in verse 11, and he could not answer Abner a word again because he feared him. The one that's running Israel is Abner. He's using Ishbosheth as a figurehead because Ishbosheth is in the lineage of Saul, but Abner's just using this all for his own advantage. That's all that's going on here. So the next section of this passage is Abner now having calculated what's going on, that Ishbosheth in the house of Saul is on the decline. David is on the incline. He knows that David is ultimately going to be king. So the next thing is he gets a hold of David. Abner is going to get a hold of David. And the whole idea here of this middle section of this chapter is that he's going to go to David and he's going to say that I'll do whatever I have to do to get the princes and the men of Israel to side with you so we can unite the kingdom. That's what Abner is saying. All right. He said, I want to bring the kingdom together. It's inevitable. Allow me to do my part with the influence I have with Israel to facilitate this. All right. And in the end, David's going to say, yeah, go ahead. But David says this, and it's interesting. This is another one of those fascinating portions of Scripture. He said, yes, let's work on this, but don't come unless you bring Michal, my wife. If you don't bring her, then just forget it. The deal's off. The whole issue of Israel and Judah being united under David comes down to whether or not you're going to get Michal, my wife, who Saul gave to this other guy. You bring her to me, and then we can begin the negotiations. Isn't that interesting? No, David is saying, no, I'll just stand out here on the outside, and I'll keep winning victory after victory unless you go get me Michal, and then we can begin rather than going to the Department of Defense for military action, we'll go to the Secretary of State so we can talk about how we can resolve this and we can get the nation united. All right, that's what's going on. And of course, nothing is going to stop Abner. This is Abner. I mean, this guy, he's just going to pull the trigger here on this and get this all going. So if David said that's what we have to do, then that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go get Michal. And the key to this is that Abner is seeing where he is going to maintain the most power. And now if he can get in the good graces of David by this negotiation, he's moving from the house of Saul to the house of David, and things are going to be good for him, continue to be good for him. You see? That's why I call him. He's just a manipulator. He is a worldly wise man. This is Abner, and he's a military genius. He's a general. All right. So it says this, And I love this passage for all those out there that I was telling my wife and telling others that people think that the little bit they know can get them in trouble with all the inconsistencies in the Bible. And the people that argue about us with inconsistencies in the Bible, most of them don't know anything about the Bible. All right, they're arguing from a pretty ignorant perspective. Okay, they just don't know. And so then they say, well, what about this? What about this? And that's like talking, figuratively speaking, to a child, no matter how old you are. That they because they just don't know, they ask questions and they say, well, this doesn't all work. And they generally don't want to take the time to sit down for you to explain it to them either if it takes more than 2 sentences. And all I say is the problem is not with ignorance on our part, that we don't know. The problem comes from knowing it. If they only knew what was in the Bible, then they would be able to argue these unusual things factually and knowledgeably, which always create some discussion among the saints and have throughout the ages. So what's going on here? So she has been married to this guy since David's been on the run. It says, and David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, deliver me my wife Michal, which is espoused to me for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. Listen, I paid a dowry. It wasn't just 100. Your dad asked for 100. I brought 200. Remember that? It says, bring her this is my wife. This is my true love. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband. The king took her from her husband, even Phaltiel, the son of Laish. And her husband went with her along, weeping behind her to Bahurim. All right. So Abner tells the king, and the king goes about this. So here's somebody that got married to David's wife, and Abner and the king just come along and take her away. There's no bill of divorcement here. There's nothing out of the material of Deuteronomy about what you do about separating from your wife. This is by royal decree that the king walked in with the soldiers, took Michal away from this guy, and then he's going to follow them weeping because, I mean, what's he going to do with the royal authority just to take your wife away? Which is nowhere in the Bible, except here. Royal authority to take Michal away. And then the guy doesn't know what to do. So it says here in verse 16, and her husband went with her along weeping. The guy's name is Phaltiel. You might want to remember that. It's not a big name, but that's his name. Phaltiel. He comes weeping behind her to Bahurim. That is, he's following the procession that's got her, taking her back to Ishbosheth and back to Abner, and he's following along. And this is what it says. Then said Abner. This is what Abner says. I just picture him. He's up on his horse. He's following behind. He's weeping. I can't believe you're taking my wife. Abner says, then said Abner unto him, go return. That's what it says in our Bible. It might have been more than that, but this is what God wanted us to know. He says, turn around and go back. Quit following us. It's over, Phaltiel. And listening to Abner and what Abner said, he turned around and went home, and that's the end of the story. And all things have been extrapolated from this, like about marriage and polygamy and all these things. But this is fascinating. I think the big word here is Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband. The word is husband here, all right? I mean, according to the understanding of marriage, they're married, but not after the king takes her away, okay? There's no grounds for divorce here, as far as we know, because there's been nothing. David said, we're just not going to have any negotiations until I get her back and the king takes her. This is fascinating stuff. That's why I say it. Oftentimes, it's better not to read the Bible, because I think maybe some of you are out there saying, I shouldn't say better not to read the Bible, but some of you are out there saying, well, what are we going to do with that? And you know what I'm going to say to you? Yeah, what are we going to do with that? We're going to teach it because it's here. And then we're going to ask the Lord for wisdom in its application. But you don't want to take this as a precedent. You don't want to take this as a precedent. You just want to say this is a one-time event in getting David on the throne. And this is what Ishbosheth and Abner did to get Michal back to David, because nothing else is going to happen until that's resolved. So what happens is they get Michal, and Abner communicates, it says in verse 17, with the elders of Israel, saying, ye sought for David in times past to be king over you. You know he's anointed king. Now then do it, for the Lord hath spoken of David, by the hand of thy servant David, I will save my people Israel out of the hand of the Philistines and out of the hand of their enemies. Now, it's interesting here that Abner's making the case to the elders of Israel because David is a strong military man, because they've been just defeated horribly by the Philistines. There's no one there to lead them, to lead an army. And Abner is saying, if you want to win against our enemy, you got to get David on the throne. Now, I know you did. It's time to do it now because we need him. We need him to lead an army, not just to be the king. And then in verse 19, Abner has to go speak to the guys at Benjamin, because Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin, is where Saul and Ishbosheth came from. He's got to get them on board. Abner gets them on board because Abner is Abner. I'll tell you, he's something else. So everybody's on board. And then he goes to see David after he's got all these negotiations done on his end. So he's got, so to speak, his proverbial ducks in a row for those that have been siding with him and Ishbosheth. And then he goes to Hebron. He's going to meet with David, and that's what we have here in verse 20. So Abner came to David, to Hebron, and 20 men with him. It's interesting, it says 20 men, because you see he's coming down into the stronghold of David with only 20 guys. That is, he has made himself vulnerable. Abner has made himself vulnerable. I'm not saying these guys weren't armed, but they're in no position now to take David on because they are in the middle of the camp of David there in Hebron. And if he does anything sideways, the 20 guys is nothing against David's men. All right, so this is a peaceful entry. He's got 20 guys because he's the general, and you would expect that. I mean, that there's more than he's not coming by himself. Plus, I mean, the Philistines are still out there, but he brings with 20 guys, and then he meets with David. And it tells us here and it says David made Abner and the men were with him a feast. And Abner said unto David, I will arise and go, and will gather all Israel unto my lord the king, which is you, and that they may make a league with thee, and that thou mayest reign over all thine heart desireth. And David sent Abner away. And this last line is so important in verse 20. And he went in peace. That is, when Abner leaves, Israel and Judah are not at war. The leader of the army of Judah, which is going to be David, and his general is Joab, and Abner, the general of the army of Israel, left in peace. That is, there is a treaty, or there is a ceasefire between Israel and Judah. And Abner says, we are on the way to a whole change here in the history of Israel. We're going to get everybody on board, and we're going to make you the king of the United Nations, of the United Nation of Israel. And so David can make all these decisions on the run. He's amazing because he's looking at the guy that wants to kill him, and has, which is Abner. And as he sees what's changing here, he does bring Michael. He's come David's way. He only comes with 20 guys. He says that I'm having all these discussions, these negotiations with all those that might oppose you coming to the throne, and I'm getting everything lined up. And David recognizes that who he's talking to now is not the Abner that wants to kill him or is the captain of the host of Israel, but a negotiator that's trying to unite the kingdom. This is just pure wisdom on David's part. So he sends them away in peace, which is a fascinating thing. And then Joab. Now, you remember Joab. There's Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Now, Abner had killed Asahel, which is the youngest brother of Joab, the captain of David's army, and Abishai, which is the next youngest brother. These are all sons of Zariah, and they're all from Bethlehem, all right? And I should have looked it up, but they're all related to David. I should have looked it up. But they're all related to David, and coming out of the town of Bethlehem. So you know the story about Abner killing Asahel in a time of battle. This is very important. They are in a war, and so Abner kills, it's one soldier killing another soldier is all that's happening. And I made the case in the video that nobody could hear that soldiers on the field do not commit murder. They represent the civil government, all right? This is part of God's economy to protect the innocent, all right? It's not murder. Now, I know soldiers can go outside their responsibilities as soldiers and commit murder, all right, apart from that. But soldiers on the battlefield who are engaged in fighting the enemy of their nation do not commit murder. So when Abner kills Asahel, he does not commit murder. He is the representative of the nation of Israel, and essentially the responsibility for all that rests in the authority that sends him, which technically would be Ishbosheth, but Ishbosheth is just a figurehead that Abner is using. So what I'm trying to say is when Asahel was killed by Abner, it was not murder. Now what's going to happen here is Joab is going to find out that Abner's been visiting with David, and David sent him away in peace. And Joab is saying, "What are you talking about? This guy killed my brother, all right? And you just sent him away in peace." And this is what Joab says. Then Joab and all the hosts that were with him came. They told Joab, saying, "Abner the son of Ner came to see the king, came to the king, and he has sent him away, and he's gone in peace." Oh, you got to be kidding me, Joab is thinking. Then Joab came to the king and said, "What hast thou done? Behold, Abner came unto thee. Why is it thou hast sent him away, and he is quite gone?" He says, "You let him go?" And then he says, "Thou knowest Abner," because Joab does know Abner, but he doesn't know the new Abner. He says, "Thou knowest Abner, the son of Ner, and he came to deceive thee." Yeah, because that's what Abner does. He came to deceive thee and to know thy goings and thy coming in, so he could ambush you and to know all that thou doest. He's just here to spy out what you're doing. There was nothing favorable, Joab is saying, in Abner being here. Don't misread this. This guy is a wily fox, and he wasn't here for any of the reasons he said. He's here to take you out. That's what Joab is saying. And then, of course, that's not what happened, but that's what Joab is thinking, because he's really reflecting on the old Abner. And he said, "And when Joab was come out from David, he sent messengers after Abner, which brought him again from the well of Sirah, but David knew it not." And here you go. So this is treachery on the part of Joab, right here. David sends him away in peace because things are changing. Before he gets too far away, Joab sends messengers to bring him back. Now, you got to put yourself in Abner's shoes. When he leaves, everything is good between David and Abner. And as everyone is supposed to be following the directions of the king, Abner is pretty well at peace with himself. So when he gets a messenger from Joab to come back, this is not a big deal, all right, because it must be something that they overlooked and they just need to add. And but he's not fearful in this because he left David in a spirit of peace. There is no more war, and this is important. Asahel was killed in a time of war in battle, all right. Joab is going to do this. And when Abner was returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside at the gate to speak with him quietly. He says, "Here, I got something I need to tell you, Abner." All right, like he's going to whisper in his ear, right? Going to tell him quietly, and smote him under the fifth rib, and he died for the blood of Asahel his brother. That is, he gets Joab away, and while he's like buttering him up, he takes his sword and kills him. This is not in a time of war. This is murder, because they were at peace. You see, there's a difference. If Abner was killed in a time of war by Joab because they were out on the battlefield at the behest of the king for the protection of the country, that would be just a casualty of war. But that's not what's happening here, because he left in peace. He comes back in a time of peace, and then Joab kills him. All right. This is not the same. This is not retribution. This is not revenge of the same caliber. If he's killed in battle, then you respect the soldiers on the field. All right. And Abner, I think, is in some ways is expecting Joab to believe this. But Joab is so angry because he killed Asahel, and the text tells us it wasn't just Joab that killed him, it was Abishai as well. So it's like, if you can imagine, they get Abner aside, he's whispering in his ear, and these two brothers of Zariah from Bethlehem just stab him. All right, they're going to kill Abner, both of them, because they killed their youngest brother. All right, that's what's happening, which it sets the stage for the rest of the chapter, because David knows how corrupt this is. What's just happened here, and you're my general, and you pulled this off behind my back. It says he didn't tell David. It says, and afterward, when David heard it, that Joab had in this way, this deceptive way, killed Abner, the general of the Israeli army. He said, I and my kingdom are guiltless before the Lord forever from the blood of Abner the son of Ner. I had nothing to do with this, is what he's saying. Me or my kingdom. This is all on you, Joab. And this is what he says in verse 29 to Joab. This is David, okay, man after God's own heart. He said this, it's not on me what happened here. He says in verse 29, let it rest on the head of Joab and on all his father's house. And let there not fail from the house of Joab one that hath an issue, or one that is a leper, or one that leaneth on a staff, or that falleth on the sword, or that lacketh bread. There's this comprehensive curse that he places on Joab's family because he kills Abner this way. Yeah, it's horrible. And so it says, so Joab and Abishai in verse 30, his brother slew Abner, and because he had slain their brother Asahel at Gibeon in the battle. And then verses 31 to the end of the chapter all talk about the funeral and David's accolades for Abner. But it's interesting here. Let's see how much. Yeah, it says this. He said, and David said to Joab and to all the people that were with him, rend your clothes and gird you with sackcloth and mourn it before Abner. And the king David himself followed the bier. That is, at the funeral, David is behind the casket. He's there. It's interesting. And it says, and they buried Abner in Hebron, and the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. Because David is a military guy, and so is Abner. And Abner and Joab and David, they're all cut up, so to speak, of the same cloth. But Abner realizes how the prowess and how valiant Abner has been. And then it goes on to say, in verse 33, and this is the word why I said that Abner was the manipulator, manipulating fool. It's right here. And the king lamented over Abner while he's following the casket. He's thinking about what's going on. He said, died Abner as a fool dieth. Somehow, Abner, when you didn't consider the fact that if you get alone with these two guys after you killed their younger brother, the bad things are going to happen. When you should have used your wiliness the most, and your skill sets the most, and your worldly wisdom the most, to realize you don't want to get along with Joab, and you don't want to get along with Abishai after you killed Asahel, even though it's not a time of war. I don't. What David is saying is, I don't know what happened, Abner, that you died as a fool, because you didn't take these things into consideration. He says, thy hands were not bound, nor thy feet put in fetters. You weren't a prisoner. As a man falleth before a wicked man, so fellest thou. You just died like you were being mugged. The king, the general of the Israeli army. He said, and all the people wept again over him. And when all the people came to cause David to eat meat while it was yet day, David sware, saying, so do God to me and more also, if I taste bread or aught else till the sun go down. That is, he's going to fast to the rest into the day, and the day's being buried. And all the people took notice of it, and it pleased them, because good leadership, people take notice of it. And good leadership, people are pleased with, and that's what we see here. As whatsoever the king did pleased all the people, because good leadership is pleasing to the people, and that's what we see here about David. So if David's gonna fast, it's a good thing. We're gonna fast. If David's gonna weep over this general that was once his adversary, then we're going to weep as well, because we recognize the integrity of our king. That is what's happening here. You talk about a united nation around a leader. This is what David is doing here. He said, and the king said unto his servants, know ye not that there is a prince and a great man fallen this day in Israel? And as he's talking about Abner. He said, and I am this day, though anointed king. Listen to this. And I am this day weak. I am weak now, though I have been anointed king. And these men, the sons of Zeruiah, that is Joab and Abishai, be too hard for me. I've had it up to here with these guys. What they bring down upon me, what they bring down upon our efforts to get the nation together, their myopic view of what they're going to do without considering the implications of what they've just done. They are just a pain. Even after the curse, they're too hard. David is saying, my general and his brother are making it really, really hard for me. hard for me on every level. They killed Abner, all right? And undoubtedly other things because he went behind the king's back to do it. I mean, when you tie this all together, too hard for me, it could be a lot of things. The Lord shall reward the doer of evil according to his wickedness. And that's how that chapter ends. The Lord reward him. All right, there's already a curse, but he's saying these guys just gave me grief. All right. Well, that was the second time through. I hope it works. So, and the Lord bless you. It's Thursday, one more tomorrow. That was episode 173 again. I hope it went through. So, anyway, just a fascinating portion of Scripture. All right. It's going to bring us to chapter 4. And more very intriguing material for tomorrow. Stay with me. Stay with this, especially if this is new material. If it's stuff you're not familiar with, just stay with it because there's so much to learn. And what happens is once you learn it, then this is what the Spirit of God uses to guide and direct our lives. All right, that's how this all works. First, we have to know it. All right, Lord bless you, and you have a great day. And Lord willing, I'll see everybody tomorrow. Okay, we'll see you. Bye.